Thank you. A big thank you to everyone for being on today's seminar. It looks absolutely packed today. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is a topic I'm really passionate about, composing music. I don't think composing music is should be a mystery only for a talented few who apparently know how to compose music and no one else has the chance to try it. I'm sometimes envious of other art forms, in the sense that if you think of art and sculpture and modern art, it's almost like anyone's allowed to have a go. Anyone's allowed to pick up a paintbrush and make a mess on a canvas. And, sometimes those messes on canvases sell for millions of dollars, and and everyone else is left wondering. But yeah, when people go to compose music, they're so tense. They're so tense to express themselves. And so I'm going to talk about some of those issues today. I think composing music is one of the most wonderful things to try, to enjoy, it's a jigsaw puzzle. It's not something that's just you need to study theory for many, many years before you do it. I'm going to be talking about that. And so before we start getting onto the practical stuff, there are a few conceptual things about composition. Just my thoughts I want to share with you. There is no one way to compose a piece of music. So we're going to start with that. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got a few documents open right now, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm a bit slow on all this technology today. So the first, how do we compose our own music? Well, I'm going to just make a couple of points. For us, I guess, little nuggets that we can refer to today in our conversation about music, about composing music. And the first thing I'm going to say is composing has no rules. Writing, creating anything, any art, has no rules. There are no rules. It only has principles and values. Now, there are two very different things. A rule is when you say you can't or you can or you can't do something. A principle is a reason why something may or may not work, why something may sound good, why something may not sound good, to your ears, to your taste, and your ears and your taste is defined very much by your values, in a sense. So it's not a black and white thing. And we often hear a lot of cliches that are tossed about, like, oh, you need to know the rules and then you can break them. Yeah, I think that's too simplistic. I don't think it is as simple as that. So today we're not going to be following rules. We're just going to be following some principles to give us some ideas. And then we can start following a bunch of principles and decide to sort of toss them aside once we've gotten what we wanted to get out of those principles. So it's not even as simple as that. Second point I'm going to make, what came first, the chicken or the egg? We all know that story. Well, the great thing about being a composer is you get to decide what comes first. When you listen to any piece of music, the composer most likely, and I've read a lot about composers. I know a lot of composers. I'm one myself. Often a composer is focusing on just a couple of core things to build their composition from. And that, in a sense, is the egg. That's what is building the piece. And everything else is serving that one thing. And I'm going to talk a bit about different eggs that you can have in your composition. So you don't have to think about too many things. Focus on just one technique. This is really connected to the second point. Focus just on one technique, one thing, leading the way, and build everything else around that. So we're going to talk about chords today. We're going to talk about melody. We're going to talk about groove and structure. And what's quite exciting about today's seminar is some of the things we've covered in previous seminars will be extremely relevant. So if you have been on our previous seminars, if you haven't been, but you can go and check out the videos for them as well. It's all connected to what we're covering today. And the fourth thing, I'm going to say this quite a lot, I think, today. There is no such thing as random. It's impossible, in fact, to be random. So if you just close your eyes and just play a couple of notes on the piano without even putting any thought as to what it is you're playing, it is something. It is something that has been done by someone else at some point, and it's music, and it can be explained, and it has a name, and there's a name of that. If you close your eyes and just play as randomly as you even dare to try, you will not be able to be random. It's impossible. That's something you should be liberated by. And the fifth thing, there's only one indicator that really knows how we're getting in this journey of composing music. Ask your ear first. Your ears, I should say. Ask your ear last. And when all things fail, ask your ear again. Your ear, the way you hear and listen to music is the expert here. Your ear is your entire life education in music. It's more important than your theoretical knowledge. It actually is your theoretical knowledge in many regards. We all have a musical education. Even if you've never studied music in your life, you have a musical education from all the music you've heard, consciously and not consciously. That is there. It's all there in your brain, and we can sort of unlock that when we compose music. We can start, there's some musicians I work with, they like a sound of a certain type of harmony, and there's a certain type of harmony they don't like the sound of. And I've seen polar opposites with people with different ways of hearing music. That is to do with the experience they've had in their whole life with music, and those sort of preferences that we have in our head, they're to be treasured. They're not to be sort of blasted away and discarded. They're a real asset that we all have. So, the second thing I'm going to say is that we have the innocent composer paradox circle. Now, what that is, this is like a cycle that often occurs in music. So what? Randomly playing notes that sound good. As I said, there's no such thing as random, right? A band jamming in the studio. Somehow just write a hit. We call that raw talent. What is that? Well, number 2, this is further down the chain, having the ability to develop an idea. 3, finishing a good song. But curious as why it sounded good. A lot of bands just innocently write music that sounds great and they don't really know why it sounds great. They're just like, oh, I just tried this and I tried that. A bit like, in the arts, just splashing paint over the canvas. Just trying stuff. And then, well, why did that work? Why did that sound good? 4, having a slightly deeper theory understanding to knowing why something sounded good. Well, I guess my song works really well here because it did that and it did that, and that's something I like the sound of. 5, a more professional understanding of theory, really knowing all of your modes, knowing all of the fancy chords, knowing all of the inversions, really having a very deep understanding of musical theory and being able to practically apply that to compose good music. I mean, a lot of good contemporary film composers have a very strong musical theory background, so they can write music to very specific briefs in very specific situations. So that's sort of a professional composer tool. And then 6, when you get into the deep academic world, a scholarly understanding of theory that is somewhat scientific, giving you the ability to explain randomly played notes that sound good. And then that goes back to the first point. There, can you see the paradox here? There are so many, I don't think the Beatles, I mean, I use them as an example a lot, but when they were just innocently in a studio, just writing songs, having absolutely no idea what it was they were doing, had a scholarly understanding of theory. But I mean, then 20 years later, right, everyone's studied and explaining what they were doing. This has been happening for generations and generations. Composers create music and someone else goes off and explains to everyone what it was they were doing. That's, critics, they all have an opinion, right? And it's the paradox, because it's a circle, and we can be anywhere in this cycle depending on where we're up to in our musical journey. Now, I would say 2 things. Try to be an innocent composer and use your creations to educate your theory. So if you start composing just little ideas you like the sound of and just use your ear as the guide, ask your ear first, that can guide you to understanding musical theory better. And I think it's one of the most powerful ways to learn musical theory, because you're emotionally invested in it. It's not just dots on a page. You want to understand why your song sounded good. Now, if your mind is not wired that way, and some people that is the case, what you can instead do is you can practice theory and then put it into creative use. And And for those of you in that category, you should study harmony. Now, harmony is actually a huge musical, theoretical, academic topic. In classical times, let's say the 1800s and the 1900s, it was very common practice for a composer to study two disciplines. The first discipline was to study harmony and polyphony. Polyphony is the art of putting sounds together. And that was a very academic thing. And you'd usually go off, and this is before they had music conservatoires, they'd usually go off and study it with the local organist who'd show you how to piece one harmony with another and a melody with another. And, you know, many of the great composers had this training. And it was a very regimented art form. And then the second thing they would study was what is known as what they would call free composition, just the ability to freely write music with the learnings from that theoretical background. And so studying any harmony, be it contemporary harmony or traditional harmony, is good for those of you who need more of a template and a plan. But I still would encourage everybody to participate in the innocent composer paradox circle, because even if you feel you have a very structured mind and you need structure, it is good just to close your eyes a little bit and see what happens. And it's good to just engage yourself in that. And I'm going to talk about some techniques on how to do that a bit later. And we're going to just jam together today anyway and see what happens. So I'm going to go back to my first point. I don't want to talk too much. I want to get into practical stuff, but I think this is all important to get through. So I was talking about what came first, the chicken and the egg, and just focusing on one technique to lead your way. That's what we're going to try today. That's what we're going to do. So you can compose a piece of music just thinking about chords and harmony, just stringing a bunch of chords together. That's the egg here. And what the chords and the harmony is, it serves the other elements of the composition, the groove, the structure, and the melody, and the scales. Or you could write a piece where you focus primarily on the melody, writing your tune, the melody and the scales. That's what's driving your piece. And the groove and the structure and the chords and the harmony just serve that. And I could, you could name me a bunch of songs, and I probably, as a composer, would be able to predict what the composer of that song was driving their mind. If you listen to a Bob Marley tune, it's driven by the groove, right? And everything else is serving that groove. Maybe there's a few pieces where it's driven by the melody a bit more. That's a discussion for us to engage in. It's really interesting. And then structure driven. This is another great template for writing a composition, having a structure that you follow and everything serving that. So there's just a couple of things to keep in mind. Here are just a couple of what I call star accelerators that, and this is if you're further down the road of composing music, you can really start thinking about this. I know many, I think, professional musicians who probably don't think about all of these things as much as they could. I'm going to go to this one here. This is really what defines a great composer, almost more than anything else. Aesthetics and philosophy. What does that composer stand for as a musician? I mean, we know, I'll give you a great example of a very straightforward aesthetic we've heard many times: less is more. So some of the great minimalist composers have this sort of philosophy, like, I'm not going to put too many notes in this piece. I'm going to keep it really, I'm going to be very disciplined with the amount of material I use. So, if we look in pop culture, David Bowie, I mean, it's all about his style, what he was trying to achieve as a musical philosophy. Not so much even about the music. And you can say this for the great composers. They had philosophies in their music that really drove them. Tastes. That's your personal taste. Your personal taste is what your house looks like. The furniture you choose. This is all part of composing. You do this every day. You have things you like, you have things you dislike. And this is really important to bring those things to the table when you compose music, because it's your piece. You own it. Things like your process, the boundaries of your engagement, like how you're going to compose the music. Some composers only compose at a certain instrument. Some composers I mean, Elton John, he famously says he won't take too long to write a song. If it takes too long, it goes in the bin. That's his process. His process is he has to come out quite quickly, or he doesn't think it's good enough. I was speaking to a producer the other day. He says he has this test because he writes very, very quickly and writes a lot of stuff, and he throws a lot of stuff out. And he says in his process, he has to feel like he wants to sort of bounce around the room, and he has to feel excited, or it goes in the bin. And that's a really simple process. It's not very scientific either. And he's written a lot of amazing music for some big productions. So it's really interesting when composers share their processes and feedback, what you think of the piece, what others might think of what it is you're writing. Getting your opinion, other people's opinion, can be really helpful as well in just building your sound. Find as many star accelerators as you can. This is just a discussion. So if you are a more experienced writer, you want to be thinking as many of these as you can to add to these sort of templates. Okay, let's get straight to it now. Let's get to the fun stuff. It's great to see so many of you here today. Okay, so the next step is we're going to have a look. We're going to start with some templates, and I'm going to get some people to help me. So we're going to start with something very, very simple. And as many of you know with our sessions, with our school, we are a very broad church. We have music professionals. We've had some superstar composers that we've taught, to people who are complete beginners to music and just looking for something new in their life, to people who played many years ago and are starting piano again. We have we're very proud to cater and be inclusive for everyone who's just passionate about music. That's really the only rule, right? You just got to care about music. And so I always say for these seminars that we do every Friday, there's something in it, something really valuable in it for everyone. If you're really new to this, there's some really nice things that you'll be able to take from this, though there'll be some complex stuff that you won't understand straight away, which is fine. But there'll be some big nuggets to take out of today. And if you are a more experienced musician, there will still be some really big things that maybe you haven't thought of before. So this is really valuable. And so this is on a more basic level, but it's a level it's something that we often don't acknowledge. A scale consists of 7 chords. So, if we play a C major scale, for instance, and turn them all into chords, we have this. And chords 1, 4, and 5. Sorry, I was feeling a little bit old-fashioned today and put them in as Roman numerals.
See, let me know if you want me to spotlight your fingers.
My fingers? Yeah, why not? Spotlight my fingers. Yeah.
Cool. And also, maybe I think there's still quite a bit of reverb coming through on the sound, maybe.
Keyboard?
Yeah.
Yep, I'll just switch the reverb down a bit. I think I was feeling a bit dramatic when I did the sound check.
Much better.
Yeah, so we have here are the 7 chords of the C major scale. Now you could do this in any scale. You should do it in an E flat major scale. I've just chosen a few random keys for the sake of today's tutorial. But the underlying relationship of all of these chords, this is really the pivot of Western music. You have 1, 4, and 5, which are major chords. You have 2, 3, and 6, which are minor chords. And you have 7, which is a diminished chord. Now, the dance between major and minor is really what creates narrative in music. So, keeping that in mind, I'm going to demonstrate how random doesn't exist. It can't possibly exist here. I want someone to compose a progression with me right now. We might go back to the screen share now, Kate. So that's okay. We don't need my fingers now. So
no worries.
We've got 7 chords in the scale. We might just avoid the chord 7, the diminished chord, for now, just because there are more specific ways we want to use that chord. So we're just going to use any numbers between 1 and 6. So I would like someone to volunteer without any thought whatsoever 4 numbers between 1 and 6. So it's like putting down your lottery ticket, right? Anyone who'd like to volunteer 4 numbers for me? Just put your hand up if you want. I think you can put your hand up on
1, 2, 4, 6.
1, 2, 4, 6. Great. Okay. 1, 2, 4, 6. So here we have a C major chord, D minor, F major, A minor. So what I might do, I might make that a little bit more, put a bit more of a rhythm to that now. I might put 2 beats in each bar. Sorry, 4 beats in each bar, but okay, so I've used that rhythm. I'm now going to just create a little bass line under that. Now if I just listen to the sound of those chords first. It all sounds familiar, right? Anything we do sounds familiar because it's happened before. I might want to arrange it. Let me just think of a nice little... I might then play around with the scale in the left hand. So scale and chords are completely compatible with each other. So in the left hand, I might just play a bunch of notes in the C major scale. Oh, I was going a bit too fast there. I'm going to try that again. Software's not listening to me. Actually, I'm going to make these a little quicker, these notes. Actually, no, I won't. Here we go. A bit of artistic indecision there. I haven't put much thought into that at all. I'm just really playing around with the scale a little bit in relation to the chords, still starting with the note. And so I've just created this now. So I've just quickly developed the pattern just by playing around a little bit with the left hand. So you can very quickly... What I'm really trying to demonstrate here is you can very quickly get just 4 chords and start messing around with those 4 chords. Would someone else like to demonstrate? We're going to go into E flat major now for this next excerpt here. Would someone like to volunteer 4 chord numbers for me? Any 4 numbers?
1, 6, 4, 5.
1, 6, 4, 5. So this is a classic progression, this one. So if we have a listen to 1, 6, 4, 5, I'm just going to play it to everyone. 1, 6, 4, 5. How many songs do that? Does anyone want to volunteer as to what songs might use this progression? Does it sound familiar? Is this one? Great tunes use that progression. So, all right, how am I going to arrange it? I might now want to arpeggiate these chords. So I'm thinking of the groove effectively now. So I might just turn these chords into arpeggios by breaking them up. So I'll get the E flat major chord. You might want to spotlight my fingers actually, Kate. That might come in handy as well.
Yeah, that's their spotlighted.
Brilliant. Breaking up the chord, just fitting it in with the bar. And you could be trying this right now. If you're sitting near the piano, you can be thinking of any 4 numbers and writing something right now. I might put a big driving bass line with that. Sounds like something from a car ad, doesn't it? You know, like get the latest, taking you to the... So I mean, this is the great thing, is that we hear these things all the time. I'm not trying to create great art here. I'm just being functional at this point in time. I'm just looking for templates and ideas. So just a driving bass line. And then using those 4 chords, that was 1, 6, 4, and 5. That's E flat major, C minor, A flat major, and B flat major. I've created a chord pattern. So what I've basically done with whose contribution was that? Sorry, I didn't get to see names.
Me, Danny, Tom.
Denny, thanks, Denny. So so Denny suggested 1, 6, 4, 5, and I just sort of added a groove to that. In my thinking, I wasn't even thinking of melody or scales or anything, and I've just come up with a quick template. And in a lot of songs, things repeat themselves over and over again. Okay, so let's try and play around with it a little bit more. Here's a little bit of a quick win you can use with your chords when you create a chord sequence. You can play around with the concept of a suspended chord in the right hand. Now, a suspended chord, I'm going to show you a D suspended 2. This is the key of D major, and these are the 7 chords of the D major scale. Now, a D suspended 2 chord, it's just a nice little trick you can use when you're writing music. D, it has a D, E, well, sorry, it has a D, E, and an A in it, a D suspended 2. I should just play it in. So it's D, E, and A. What I'm doing is I'm not playing the major third, the F sharp. And I get this sound that's a little bit up in the air. This is really effective for film music, by the way. I'm going to put some strings on. We're talking about composition, so we don't have to be just piano specific. I mean, you can hear it's up in the air, right? Are we going to resolve to the D major? Well, we don't have to resolve to the D major. I can actually resolve to the D minor. Really simple. You can just see that in a scene from a film. It's really quite interesting. So I'd like someone to volunteer 4 chords from this scale. Let's not be so obvious now. It doesn't have to start on chord 1. Would anyone like to...
2, 4, 6, 5.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
2, 4, 6, 5.
2, 4, 6, 5. Brilliant. 2, 4, 6, and 5. So we're going to, this is the trick we're going to use. We're going to keep that D suspended D suspended 2 in the left hand and imply the 2, 4, 6, and 5 in the left hand. This is a really cool trick. And it just gives a lot of color to the music. So we have 2, 2, 4, 6, 5. So let me play that now. Let's hear what that sounds like. So we have 2. I'll just play them as straight chords first before I do the fancy suspended stuff. 2. That's a really nice progression. Now let me put the suspended 2 on the D. So it's a D suspended 2 in the right hand, and I only imply the 2, 4, 6, 5 from the left hand in octaves. Actually, right now I actually preferred the first option because that was such a nice progression. 2, 4. I'm going to use some inversions here. 6, 5. Now, what was really nice about that was the reason why that sounded really I want to just show you how you can draw from these amazing simple tricks.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just want to make sure everyone can hear you on the mic. The piano sounds great.
Okay.
But
yep. I'll turn my mic.
Just when you're playing the piano and talking at the same time, can't hear you as well.
Okay, is that better? Is
Much
that
better. Much
Great.
better.
All right, I've just whacked up my volume. Thanks for that, Kate.
No worries.
So, let's just hear that again. And we've got one more progression. So, who would like to contribute 4 numbers? For this?
Tom, could you do 6251?
6251. Six, 2, 5, 1. This is an absolutely classic pattern, this one. Now, I don't know if everyone who's contributed these patterns were thinking of other songs that they liked, or whether they were just randomly putting numbers together, obviously with the knowledge that it's impossible to be random. But I mean, this progression is just classic. Fly me to the moon and let me swing on the stars. Feeling my pain with his fingers. Da 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 da. There's just tons of songs. What have I gotta do to make you love me? Elton John. Oh, endless. Absolutely. Oh, Vivaldi, the middle of the Four Seasons. It's a really nice turn. 6-2. 5-1. So we could make an accompaniment of that. Let's be a bit more like a classical style here. We could break up the chord in the left hand. All right, where's my chords gone? It's over here now. We could break up the chord in the left hand. Okay, let me just try that. So that's a sort of Mozart style Alberti bass. G minor, C major, F major. And then of course I can put a melody to that bass line. Alright, where was I? Started down here. I just need to change the formatting a bit on the... I will clean this up, these examples up that we've created together, and put them into the student portal, because it's quite fun to just do a nice it's fun to do sort of a nice open jam on this. So if I get those chords and break them up into this sort of bass style, an unfortunate place for a page turn, I can reformat that, but I won't do that right now. And then we've got this. So here I've got the bass, and then I might just use notes from the F major scale. Now even if I play the F major scale in order, that would melodically fit. Might not be the most interesting melody in the world, but you've got a starting point. Then I might go, okay, I'll start on the 3rd note of the F major. So I have a starting point there. So I just hope this demonstrates to everyone how accessible just composing some simple ideas is. So I want to now go a little bit further off just the topic of chords within a scale, and just open things up a little bit more. And so going back to those different eggs that come first in a composition, I want to just go on to the topic of structure. And structure can also really help liberate us when we've got a blank page in front of us. And I thought we'd compose a piece together right now that uses the famous A, B, A structure. So you have 8 bars of the A section of the piece. You play it twice. It's great for the audience. They get to hear it twice, so they get to know that section of the music. Then we have the B section, and then we return to the A section at the end. A lot of songs do this. It happens a lot in classical music. It's a nice structure. There are tons of other structural templates out there. It's just one I thought we'd try today. So we're now going to be we're going to sort of mix things up a little bit now. I don't even want to think about what key we're going to be in. We're just going to follow this structure. Structure is going to lead the way in this template, not harmony. So if anyone would just like to randomly shout out a chord for me for this first section of the piece. I've
B
got the
flat.
E flat major.
E flat major. So we're going to start with an E flat major. And what chord is it going to go to next?
A flat.
A flat major. Great. And next,
G minor.
G minor. And what will happen after that?
D flat.
Did someone say G flat?
D flat.
E flat.
D flat.
Oh, D flat. Sorry. D flat. Brilliant. All right, let's have a listen to those 4 chords. E flat, A flat, G minor, D flat. I love the D flat, just created that. That was the flattened 7th of the scale. But we weren't thinking about that, right, were we? We may have been, but just by putting these colours together and splashing them on the canvas. Okay. I always think now, when you've started something like this, I think it's always, and you've come up with 4 nice chords, you want to be careful you don't introduce too much new material. That less is more aesthetic is quite useful. So I'm the only sort of role I'm going to play in this composition that we're all co-creating together right now is I will repeat things that I see fit to. So I think that A flat should come back now. And then someone else can take the floor for the next chord.
C minor.
C minor. Ooh, nice. All right, let's hear what that sounds like. And I think I would say another A flat after that. And what should it go to after the A flat? Anyone?
E flat.
E flat. Okay. Exactly the same way. Using those same chords, I could be building up the composition. Okay, and now we're to the next bit. Where is it? Where does it want to go? This is interesting, actually. Before someone puts their hand up, and I always think when we're at this point in the composition, this is where it gets really interesting. I'm starting to feel the more I compose music, it's when the composition is now. It's like it's got a bit of personality to it. It's its own entity, and even I don't get a say in what it wants to do. It starts to just take a life of its own. It starts to say, "I want to go here. Don't take me there." And you're sort of being dragged by the composition a little bit, particularly after that second time where the momentum was building, and it's like, well, where do we want to go now? So does anyone have any ideas? Where is it going to go to next?
B flat.
B flat, yeah. Lovely. And then what after that?
F minor.
F minor, lovely.
Back to E flat. Back to E flat.
Back to E flat.
And then back to F minor.
F minor 7 there, I heard. So let's take it to F minor 7. So, we got. Oh, that's good. Now the F minor 7, it's like a question mark. Anyone for the next chord? Okay, no one's put their hand up, so it has to be G minor 7.
A G.
Oh, did someone say G minor?
I said G major. But...
Oh, G major. Yeah, why not? I like that. That's even better.
And repeat the F minor going backwards. F minor, E flat, B flat.
Okay. F minor, and then is it F minor 7? And then E flat. So going backwards to the E flat. And this is great. Already I'm just seeing I'm sort of sensing everyone's intentions, which is really powerful because it's your intentions that makes you a composer. Like, oh yeah, I want it to move that way. And some of you might be going, no, I want it to go this way. You might be thinking, oh, I would have gone that way. That's great. That's what makes you a unique composer of your own. So you can be looking at this structure and making your own version of it right now. There's as we sort of collapse the music into this particular possibility. And what chord should we have after that E flat then?
E flat dominant 7th.
Ooh, an E flat dominant 7. So, do you mean as in an E flat 7, not the dominant 7 of E flat? Just double checking.
I meant B flat with a dominant 7th. So
Great. Sorry, just play that again for me. Do you mean the dominant 7 of an E flat?
yeah,
Yeah.
An E flat major to get.
Gotcha. Yep. Understood. So, I'm gonna put that in. Okay. And then, of course, we just return to the A at the end. So we've already done this bit here. All right, so we've got the whole piece done. Let me play it now. And you notice how the structure sort of does a lot of the work for us as well, which is really, really useful. So it takes away this aspect of, oh my gosh, I have to know all this theory to write music. I know we were primarily using chords in E flat major, but probably the more interesting parts of the piece were the chords that violated out of E flat major. When I say violated, they were just from other keys, or they're using mixture, such as the G major chord, because G major is not in the key of E flat major, so it takes us to a sense of a relative minor. But it's just the fact that and you go back to, this is really when we talk about different colors in our musical sounds. And next week, our seminar, by the way, is going to be on chord progressions, killer chord progressions. So this is going to link in with this really nicely. You can change these natural functions. So you could say, if chord 4 is normally major, you can then make that minor. You can get chord 2, which is normal, 3, which is normally minor, and make them major. And that's, by flattening the 7th here, we had a D flat major. But even if you're just innocently finding these chords with your ear, again, ask your ear. You don't have to. I mean, sometimes actually theoretical knowledge can make our piece sound more contrived and theoretical. And so the interesting thing is that there are no rules in that sense. And of course, then you've got the nuts and bolts of a piece. If I were then to start to notate it or to develop it into a song, I could then think about how, because I'm hearing that A section 3 times, how can it be a little bit different every time? Maybe one chord could be different. So maybe the last time I play this, I could just change one of the chords here. What if I made this a G flat major chord instead of a G minor chord? And so I often say that a lot of really great composers never ever do anything the same way twice, but they repeat things all the time. So they're repeating things they've already written, but they just make little tweaks here and there, and it just like, whoa, just really wakes you up. You're like, oh, that's a little different. And that's a really nice trick as well. I want to talk about this is really going to be going into the topic that we'll be covering next week as well. So this next week is almost like a continuation of what we're doing now, but it won't just be about composition. It's about music in general and playing piano in general as well. But here are some progressions that are just a little bit more advanced and you can play around with. Using, and I've demonstrated these in C major just for clarity. So flatten chords, for instance, if you I've made a mistake here, I apologize. That flat is meant to be before the chord, not after it. This is where I get a chord. Normally chord 3 would be an E minor, but I actually flatten the entire chord and make it an E flat major. So here's a progression: C major, E flat major, F major, C major. It just gives this, it really opens up the sound. Here's another one, flatten 7. Now that's exactly what was going on here. This is a flatten 7th chord. Who volunteered the flatten 7 chord?
I did, Helga.
Excellent. Did you know you were doing that?
No, I didn't.
That's the answer I wanted to hear. This exactly demonstrates this paradox I was talking about. Like, oh, that might sound nice there. Let's see what it sounds like. And you used a flatten 7, which actually was really was really what helped define that first section. And the flatten 7 is where you use the flattened 7th note from the scale. So rather than playing a B natural, you make it a B flat in the case of C major. In the case of E flat major, it would be a D flat. But here's the progression: 1, flatten 7, 5. Oh, sorry, 4, 1. Here's another one. Here's something a little bit more adventurous: 1, flatten 2. So getting the D and making a D flat major chord. 1, flatten 2, flatten 3, 1. These are just formulas you can plug into anytime you're looking for some new chords. 1, and then flatten 6. That's meant to be a flatten 7. Flatten 7. Finishing on 1. Just a few templates to play around with. Did I have any more there? Don't think I did actually. So some really interesting ideas there. Does anyone have any questions? Any compositional questions they'd like to ask me based on anything they've seen today?
Tom, hi, it's Danny.
Hi, Danny.
How you doing, mate? You all right, yeah?
Good.
Right, when you're in, let's just take the key of C major, right? So when we're in the key of C major, like the 7 diatonic chords that you've explained, like the 1, 4, 5, 2, 3, 6, and the 7 minor.
Yes.
How can we add other chords in different keys? Like, for example, if I say like the parallel will be C minor, right? C major. So can I pull chords from C minor, like natural minor, harmonic minor scale, and then add them into
Yes, you can. Yeah. So you could, as I said, almost it goes back to there's no such thing as randoms. You could be as adventurous as you wanted to be. So you could be in C major, then go to a C minor, then go to an A flat major, and go to an E flat minor. The only interesting discussion then that would take place after such a composition has been composed is, what are the function of those chords? That's the theoretical conversation, going back to my paradox, I guess. And often what happens when we compose a piece, we might go, I want to add a chord from that scale that's completely unrelated to C major. Let's see what happens. And it might sound really good. And you might find out that actually the chord that you added actually does have a relationship to C major, which didn't occur to you. I hope that slightly answers your question. So you can use your knowledge of different scales and chords to decorate a piece and add all this extra stuff to it, and then sort of analyze later. I always think the analytical brain and the ear brain that's just listening and responding to different harmonies and chords in a piece should almost be separate. You should just use your ear first and then analyze separately later. That's one way you could approach it.
Nice one. That was great. Thanks, Tom.
Tom, James here. I'm curious, when you're analyzing or composing, do you tend to look at these chord progressions sometimes within what I call their kind of tonal family? In other words, 1, 3, and 6 would be more of a tonic family, and 2 and 4 would be more of a subdominant. I don't know if that language is still used.
Yeah. So
Old
tonic,
school.
subdominant, and dominant. That's a really good question. So I'll explain to everyone what we mean by the families of tonic and subdominant and dominant. Is tonic is chord 1, and subdominant is chord 4, or anything if we think of it as families 1 and 4. If we think of it in families, the subdominant is what is leading you to the dominant, which is 5, and then 5 goes back to 1. Now, what I mean by that also is that, so if we have these 3 families of chords, tonic, subdominant, and dominant, quite often what happens, and this I hope answers your question, is you can't escape from that pattern musically, almost scientifically, even if you try. And composers have been trying for a very long time to disguise dominant chords with all these fancy notes. I mean, you've got tritone substitution in jazz where you use the flattened second instead, but it ends up just functioning as a dominant chord. There are reasons for it as well, and I won't go into all of the reasons for it, other than the fact that you can think of these chords as, in the theoretical terms, or in the terms that they are a family of chords, chords 1 leading to dominant preparation, in the subdominant family leading to dominant, and then going back to 1. If that helps you structure your piece more, it's definitely a very useful thing to know and to think about, and we should know it sort of in the long run as composers. But if we don't think of it at all, this is sort of the paradox, it will show up. You can't avoid it. I mean, there's even atonal pieces written by the second Viennese school who were trying to, in the early 20th century, remove tonality from music completely. And even in their music, tonality appears when they were trying to destroy it. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it's also to do with harmonics. Like if you play a note, any note, there's a 5th overtone ringing over it. So I think in harmony, there is this scientific, almost tendency for it there to be this passage between tonic to dominant no matter what happens. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, and I love your addition there to my understanding about how harmonics is underlying it as well. I hadn't thought of that at all. That's great.
Yeah, I really think there's a lot of sort of deeper things going on. And I think that's the great thing about being a composer and being a pianist. This is what we have to remember. We have had hundreds of years of music evolution to give us the tuning system we have and the keyboard system we have, and which we just basically exploit. With all of these decisions and changes and improvements have happened in music over centuries and centuries. It even goes back to Pythagoras. And how he found the octave and how he found all the problems about the octave, which were solved later in Europe when they were trying to equalize all the keys in temperament across the keyboard. All these battles have been won for us, and we just write music in that battle. And then Sarah has just said geek heaven, and yes, this is geek heaven, but if you're not a geek, you don't even have to think about it because the system is sort of doing it for you. And I think that explains why a lot of musicians or just bands just innocently write great songs. They have no idea what they're doing. I've worked with guitarists who've written hit records and they don't even know the chords in their song. They've just gone, "Ugh." I mean, Joni Mitchell, she forgot all the tuning she used on some of her early albums. I mean, she just was listening. She was just using her ear. So there's this interesting paradox, and you want to just adapt to that paradox to your preference, to how your brain works. If you want to be more geeky and get deep into the theory and use that to harbor your creativity, or if you want to just push the theory aside and just use your ears and close your eyes and make beautiful sounds, there are no rules. Does anyone else have a question?